The last light of day spilled across Silver Creek Valley, painting the dry hills in bronze and gold. Caleb Rowan stood by the barn fence, mending a post his father had told him to fix that morning. The sound of the hammer echoed against the quiet, broken only by the wind that carried the scent of dust and distant rain. For a moment, everything felt right. Then the riders came. 7 of them, sweeping down the ridge like a storm that had been waiting for the perfect moment to break. Their coats were too clean, their horses too well fed for honest work. Caleb saw them long before they reached the yard and felt the unease rise in his gut. His father, Elias Rowan, stepped out of the farmhouse before the dust had even settled. He was a tall, hard man, gray in the beard, sunburned from 40 years of tending cattle under this same sky. "Evenin', gentlemen," he said, voice calm but firm. "You're a long way from Redstone Ridge." The leader dismounted slowly. Harlan Voss, the kind of man whose eyes never matched his smile. "We're here for business," he said. "Mr. Rothwell's made a fair offer for this land. $10,000 in cash." Elias didn't even blink. "This land isn't for sale." Harlan's smile faded, replaced by the cold calculation of a man used to getting his way. "You might want to rethink that. Word is, the ground under your ranch hides a spring big enough to feed 100 others. Water's money now. You hold the key, old man." I said no. The first punch came fast. One of the men, Brig, a heavy-set rider with a scar splitting his cheek, swung a rifle butt across Elias's jaw. Caleb shouted, dropping his hammer, but another man grabbed him, throwing him into the dirt. The world tilted, a blur of boots and fists. Elias tried to rise, but Harlan kicked him down again. "You've got 1 week," he said evenly, as if reading from scripture. 1 week to sign the papers. If you don't, we'll come back and finish the conversation. They left him broken in the dust, his blood dark against the dry earth. When the hoofbeats finally faded into the distance, Caleb crawled to his father's side. Elias's breathing was shallow, his ribs moved wrong under his shirt. Caleb dragged him into the house, laying him near the fire. He boiled water, found rags, did everything he could, but nothing stopped the pain. His father's eyes fluttered open, glassy with fever. "Leave it, son," Elias whispered. "They'll be back. Nothing you can do now." Caleb clenched his fists. "There's someone who owes you, Pa Kale of the Tashan tribe. You saved his brother from the flood years ago. He owes you his life." Elias tried to shake his head, but the effort sent pain through his body. "That debt's old. Their world's not ours. Don't go looking for them." But Caleb had already decided. He packed dried meat, water, his father's rifle, and a blanket. When he stepped outside, the moon was rising over the valley, cold and bright. He looked back once, through the open door, at the man who had taught him everything about work and honor. "I'll come back with help," he said quietly. "I swear it." Then he mounted his horse and rode into the night. The road north toward Tashan territory wound through canyons that most men avoided. The land grew harsher with every mile, rock walls closing in, the wind carrying the cries of unseen things. Caleb rode through the darkness until his horse stumbled from exhaustion. He didn't stop. Every time he blinked, he saw his father on the ground again, blood on his lips. By dawn, the valley was far behind him. The air turned colder, sharper. He crossed the dry riverbed where lightning-split trees marked the border of Tashan lands. The story said white men who crossed without permission didn't come back. Caleb swallowed the fear and kept going. At midday, his water ran out. His horse's breathing came rough and wet, foam gathering at its mouth. The sun beat down mercilessly. Caleb's head pounded, his throat felt like sand. He could have turned back, but behind him waited the men who'd nearly killed his father. Ahead lay the only chance of saving him. Late that afternoon, he saw it, a thin line of smoke curling up from behind a ridge. He slowed his horse, lifted one hand high, and waited. The silence pressed against him. Minutes crawled by. Then, from the shadows, a figure appeared, a young warrior with dark braids and a rifle slung across his back. His eyes were sharp, unreadable. Caleb didn't move. He said the only word he knew that might matter. Kale. The warrior's expression changed, barely a flicker. He gestured for Caleb to follow and turned toward the hills. They walked for nearly an hour through narrow paths until the canyon opened into a hidden basin. Dozens of shelters dotted the ground. Children played near the fires, women worked quietly with their hands. And in the center stood Cale, the man Caleb had come to find. He was taller than Caleb remembered from his boyhood, his hair streaked with gray, his arms marked with scars that told old stories. When he turned and saw Caleb, his face went still. "Rowan's son," Cale said. "Why are you here?" Caleb tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. The exhaustion, the fear, the dust, they all came crashing down at once. He forced the words out, hoarse and trembling. "They beat him," he said. 7 men. They wanted our land." He said no. "They nearly killed him." Cale's jaw tightened. Around them, the camp had gone silent. Warriors stopped sharpening their blades. Women paused their work. "They'll come back," Caleb continued. "In a week, maybe less. If they find him alive, they'll finish it. I rode 2 days to get here. Please. I need your help." For a long moment, Cale said nothing. The fire cracked between them. Then he spoke, his voice low and steady. "Your father pulled my brother from the river when the flood came. My brother breathed because of him. A debt like that doesn't fade." Caleb's knees nearly gave out with relief, but Cale wasn't finished. "You ask for war," he said. 7 men, maybe more behind them. "If we ride, there will be a price, blood for blood." "They'll kill him if you don't," Caleb said, desperate now. "I saw it in their eyes. They won't stop." Cale turned to the fire again, staring into the flames. The silence stretched until it felt like the whole desert was waiting. Then he spoke in his own language, his voice carrying through the camp like thunder. One warrior stepped forward. Then another. Then a dozen more. Until 50 stood behind him, then 100. Cale looked back at Caleb. "We ride at dawn," he said simply. "You brought this to our fire. You'll see it through." That night, Caleb lay beside the central fire, too tired to sleep. Around him, the Tashan prepared for battle. Blades were sharpened. Horses were saddled. Drums beat softly in rhythm with the night wind. When he closed his eyes, he saw his father again, hurt, bleeding, alone, and he knew there was no turning back. Tomorrow, the desert would burn with vengeance. And at sunrise, 400 Tashan riders would ride for Silver Creek Valley. The dawn came cold and gray over Silver Creek Valley. Thin mist clung to the ground, blurring the edges of the corral and the broken fence posts. Inside the house, Elias Rowan stirred awake. Every breath was a reminder of his broken ribs, but his mind was clear again, and the first thought that came to him was fear for his son. He'd known the moment Caleb wrote out what the boy planned to do. The old friendship between the Rowans and the Tashan tribe was a quiet legend, but debts like that came with consequences. Elias had lived long enough to know that calling on warriors meant inviting a storm. Outside, the land was still. Too still. Then he heard it, the faint, distant thunder of hooves rolling across the valley floor. Caleb rode at the front beside Cale, the Tashan leader. Behind them, the line of riders stretched as far as the eye could see, 400 strong, every man armed and silent. No shouts, no cries. Only the rhythmic pounding of hooves, moving in perfect harmony. The land changed as they rode south. The dry hills gave way to open grassland, and soon the Rowan ranch came into view. The house stood small and lonely against the horizon, the door still broken from the last attack. Kale lifted his hand, signaling a halt. Warriors spread out across the ridges and dry creek beds, vanishing into the land itself. Within minutes, they were invisible, just part of the desert's quiet patience. "You wait here," Kale said. "When they come, you'll stand with your father." "Not before." Caleb nodded, though every part of him wanted to rush to the house. He dismounted, running the last stretch on foot. Inside, his father struggled to rise when he heard the door creak open. "Caleb, you fool," Elias rasped, half in anger, half in relief. "You went to them." "They're here, Pa." "All of them." Kale brought his warriors. Elias leaned back against the wall, closing his eyes. "God help us. Do you know what that means?" Before Caleb could answer, a sharp whistle echoed outside, the sound of a scout signaling from the ridge. "Riders approaching." Caleb moved to the window and peered through the shattered shutter. 7 men again, riding in a slow line, confident as ever. At their head was Harlan Voss, coat spotless, beard trimmed, a smile on his face like he'd already won. He swung off his horse in front of the porch, boots crunching against the dirt. "Time's up, old man," he shouted. "Hope you had time to think about our offer." No answer. Only silence. He gestured, and his men fanned out behind him, forming a half-circle. The air was thick with arrogance and dust. Then, without warning, the desert itself seemed to rise. From every ridge, every hollow, every patch of grass, Tashan warriors stood, rifles aimed and bows drawn. 400 men surrounded the 7 riders in a seamless circle. The sound of metal shifting, hooves stamping, and the collective exhale of an army filled the valley. Voss froze mid-step. His hand twitched toward his pistol, then stopped. His smirk faded as his eyes darted from face to face, realizing what he'd walked into. Kale stepped forward through the line, his horse moving with the slow grace of something inevitable. His voice carried across the silence. "You beat an old man," Kale said evenly. "You thought he was alone. You thought he was weak." Voss tried to keep his voice steady. "This is between us and the Rowans. Not your people." "You made it our concern," Kale replied, "when you touched the man who saved my brother's life." He dismounted, his boots striking the ground with deliberate weight. "A debt like that is sacred." The outlaw with the scar, Brig, shifted his hand toward his rifle. 3 arrows struck the dirt in front of his boots, so fast the movement barely registered. The message was clear. Caleb stepped out of the house, his father's rifle clutched in his hands. His heart hammered, but he didn't hesitate. He wanted them to see his face. The boy they'd left in the dirt wasn't a boy anymore. Voss's eyes found him, and something cold passed between them, recognition, disbelief, then fear. "You," he muttered. "You brought them." Caleb's voice didn't shake. "You gave me a week. It's been 2 days." Kale moved closer to Voss until they were only a few feet apart. "You'll leave this valley now," he said. "You and your men. You'll never return." "And if we do?" Voss said, though his voice had lost its edge. Kale's tone didn't rise. It didn't need to. "If you ever cross this land again, the desert will remember your faces. And we will come for you, not 400, but every warrior from every camp. You'll vanish like smoke." The silence that followed felt eternal. Then Voss swallowed hard, looking at his men. "Mount up," he ordered quietly. They did. Slowly. Carefully. The circle of warriors parted just enough to let them through. The 7 riders passed between them, the sound of hooves fading into the distance until only dust remained. The Tashan stayed 3 more days. They built a perimeter, posted guards, and watched every road leading to the ranch. Word spread fast. Traders, settlers, and drifters all heard the story. the Rowan ranch now had an army watching over it. Inside the house, 2 Tashan women tended to Elias's wounds with herbs and bandages. By the 2nd day, he could sit up, by the 3rd, he could stand. "You took a hell of a risk, boy," Elias said one evening, staring at the fire. "Riding out there alone." Caleb smiled faintly. "I didn't have a choice." Elias nodded. "Ka'll tell you what happens now." "Only that debts don't die easy," Caleb said quietly. Elias looked toward the window where Ka'll stood outside, speaking with his warriors. "He's right," he murmured. "We're tied to them now, by honor. We owe them as they once owed us." That night, the valley glowed with the soft light of 100 campfires. Caleb stood outside, listening to the sound of drums echoing against the canyon walls. The world felt bigger now, deeper, older. He realized the fight for their land had never just been about cattle or fences. It was about legacy. About what kind of men they were. At sunrise on the 4th morning, Ka'll announced they would leave. The immediate danger was gone. The outlaws had fled the territory, their employer dead of heart failure 2 towns over. Before leaving, Ka'll found Caleb by the corral, mending a fence post much like he had the day it all began. "Your father taught you well," Ka'll said. "He taught you that honor must be protected. You proved it." Caleb lowered his hammer. "I just did what I had to." Ka'll smiled faintly. "Courage doesn't wait for permission." He reached into a leather pouch and pulled out a smooth stone etched with a single carved line. "This belonged to my brother, the one your father saved. He carried it until his death. Now it's yours." Caleb turned the stone in his hand, feeling its cool weight. "I don't know how to thank you." "You already have," Ka'll said simply. He clasped Caleb's shoulder once, then turned toward his horse. Within an hour, the Tashan camp was gone, 400 riders disappearing over the ridge like a wave retreating into the earth. The valley was quiet again. Elias stood beside his son, leaning on a cane but smiling faintly. "They'll talk about this for years," he said. "The day 400 men rode because of one promise kept." Caleb looked down at the stone, then toward the rising sun. "It wasn't just a promise," he said. "It was a debt of honor." Elias nodded. "Then keep honoring it. Every day." The 2 men stood together, the ranch stretching out before them, broken fences, scorched ground, and all. But to Caleb, it had never looked stronger. As the wind picked up, carrying the faint scent of smoke and sage, he slipped the stone into his pocket and smiled to himself. Because now he understood. Strength wasn't in muscle or bullets, it was in keeping your word. And that was a legacy worth protecting. The sun was setting behind the red hills when the last trace of the Tashan riders disappeared into the horizon. The wind swept across Silver Creek Valley, carrying with it the fading echo of hooves and the scent of smoke from their fires. Caleb Rowan stood alone by the fence line, the same one he'd been fixing the day everything changed. In his hand, he held the smooth, carved stone Ka'll had given him, a silent promise, heavy with meaning. He turned it between his fingers, feeling the cool grooves that time had carved into it. Behind him, the ranch was quiet. His father rested inside, healing, strong enough now to move on his own. The house still bore the scars of violence, a shattered door, blood-stained floorboards, broken furniture, but those things no longer spoke of loss. They were reminders of what had been endured, and survived. Caleb looked toward the distant ridge where the outlaws had vanished days ago. Somewhere beyond those hills, Harlan Voss and his men were running from ghosts, not just of the Tashan, but of their own fear. They'd learned that some men couldn't be broken, and some debts could summon armies. The valley was silent now, but it wasn't empty. It felt watched, protected. The bond between the Rowans and the Tashan tribe had been reforged in fire and blood, stronger than before. Word would spread fast across the frontier, "Don't touch the Rowan land, it stands under the Tashan's shadow." As the last light bled into twilight, Elias Rowan stepped out onto the porch, leaning on the doorframe. His voice carried across the stillness. "Beautiful evening, ain't it?" Caleb smiled. "Feels different now." "It is," Elias said. "You changed it." Caleb looked back at the horizon. "We both did." Elias nodded slowly, his face lined with pride. "This land's yours to protect now. Not just with fences or rifles, but with honor. Remember what that means." Caleb's gaze drifted again to the stone in his hand. "I won't forget, Pa." The two stood together as the desert swallowed the sun. Shadows stretched long and soft over the ranch, and for the first time since the attack, peace settled over the valley like a warm blanket. In that moment, Caleb understood everything his father had ever tried to teach him, that strength wasn't about fighting harder, but about standing firm when it mattered most. That keeping your word, even when it costs you, is the mark of a man worth remembering. He slipped the stone back into his pocket, feeling its steady weight against his chest, a heartbeat from another life, another man's courage now his to carry. Tomorrow there would be fences to fix, horses to feed, and new scars to mend. Life would go on. But Caleb knew one thing for certain: he would never be the same boy who once feared losing everything. He had found something greater, a legacy carved not in land or blood, but in loyalty, honor, and the quiet strength of keeping a promise. As the stars broke across the darkening sky, the wind whispered through the grass, a soft, ancient voice only the brave could hear. It said, "We remember." And in that quiet truth, the story of Caleb Rowan and the riders of the Tashan became legend.